Welcome to the broadcast today. My name is Douglas Gabriel. Today's presentation is entitled, Is Plasma God? Now, Tyler and I have, over the years, addressed some of the most difficult topics you can because many of them are in contradistinction to what we would call modern science, or what throughout these presentations I will be calling materialistic science or scientism. So scientism is what we're going to show as a contrast to what we could call the plasma cosmology. Now, if you follow us, you know that we've just recently released a few books on this topic. One of them is called The Mystery of Life Found in Plasma. And that book goes into great detail, and we must be very, very specific when we're talking about something as seemingly nebulous as plasma, and yet ubiquitous as plasma, and also the fact that plasma is the new science. You can literally say that there's no branch of science that is not being affected by experimentation with plasma in man-made laboratories. But of course, plasma doesn't exist particularly well in a man-made laboratory. It exists in cosmic space. 99.99% of the universe is plasma, and 65% of that is dark plasma, non-glowing plasma, what they call dust clouds. So when we're talking about the universe, that is quite different than what we're referring to when we speak as a human being standing on the earth, where we are extraordinarily limited by the atmospheres that we have descended from down to the earth. And I say descended because some people, like Robert Temple, who wrote a book called recently and is now a really big success, and so many people are addressing plasma on their own channels and YouTube, that we must address it because it is extraordinarily mistaken in its assumptions. As a matter of fact, when you read this book, if you do, and I don't recommend it, it's a wonderful book about the history of how plasma came about and the fact that Robert Temple is one of the biggest name droppers I've ever known. This man traveled around and met with practically everyone in the modern world who was working on plasma, except for those mad scientists who are trying to create plasma on Earth. Now, we're going to have to give some basic instructions here, and later on we'll go into the deeper secrets of plasma, but at first we must get you familiar with the landscape. And to do so, it's imperative to remember that Rudolf Steiner said that what is in the universe is found in the human body, and what is specifically the universe is exactly found in the human heart. Now, this has thrown people off for a long time, but we wrote a book on it. The human heart, a supersensible organ of perception. We've described the fact that the human heart is a plasma magneto-hydrodynamic generator, and this is a fact. Now, when we said this, it's quite coincidental that science has now created what's called MHD, a magneto-hydrodynamic generator based upon plasma, and they have made it into a man-made heart. And they've placed that MHD heart inside of a human being, and it works quite effectively. Now, throughout my life, I've been trying to figure out what caused the energy in the human body. It used to be called cybernetics, and then it was called the potential between sodium, potassium, and calcium crossing over the nerve and crossing over the cell membrane. And when it enters through this process of calcium gating, it supposedly stimulates adenosine triphosphate that gives us bioenergetic energy in every single cell. I was just listening to one of my favorite authors, Gerald Pollack, just a couple days ago, and he pointed out the research, which I went and checked on, that shows that adenosine triphosphate cannot possibly produce the energy in the body that creates a magnetic field around the body that can extend in a normal person 10 to 12 feet outside of the body, and it comes directly from the heart. And then there's also a generator, some type of bioelectric generator in the brain. Again, in the Gospel of Sophia, Volume 2, we explain all of these things in spiritual and mechanical directions that show you that you can study these things yourself to prove and demonstrate that what we're saying is true. So science has a lot of information, but they have very, very inadequate theories. So scientism is really a series of theories that someone who is a materialistic scientist or believes in that materialistic science called scientism, it's a religion, folks. It's an ism. And as far as I can tell, most isms don't work out because they're limited perspectives from a specific time in human development. As we develop further, we will understand the ethers, the seven ethers: warmth ether, light ether, sound ether, which is also called chemical or valence or number ether, and life ether. And then the other three ethers called akasha, which is basically the vessel of the entire universe, which is limited and does have an outer edge on it. As a matter of fact, today I'll be talking about the fact that Rudolf Steiner pointed out that the Earth has an exosphere, and there's a thermosphere below that, and it has what's called a thermopause. So Rudolf Steiner said that if it wasn't for, and this was before science ever said anything about this, Rudolf Steiner said that if it wasn't for this extremely hot atmosphere containing the lower atmospheres, there would be no life on Earth. And now they know that in the thermosphere, it gets up to 6,000 to 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And as you know, as you rise up from the lithosphere, the Earth, the crust of the Earth, into the troposphere, the stratosphere, the mesosphere, the thermosphere, exosphere, and then out into space, at each one of these levels, there is a thing called a pause. So if you rise up from the Earth in our troposphere, when you get to the top of it, as it gets colder and colder, all of a sudden there's a layer of warmth there that is called the tropopause. The same is true for the mesopause, the thermopause. So, and as well, same for the sun. The sun goes out to a certain distance and then it meets what's called the heliopause. It turns and comes back upon itself. And this is critical to understand if you wish to see the way that plasma works. Now, plasma, I'm going to have to give a couple definitions here because before I get into extrapolating on this, you will need to understand the terms I'm talking about. First off, we as human beings, we also have atmospheres in our body. We have components or constituent components. It can be broken down into three: the body, the soul, and the spirit. Or it can be broken down into seven: the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, the ego, and the three higher spiritual natures of the human being. It can also be broken down into nine because the soul itself, the body, soul, spirit, the soul, has the capacities which we call thinking, feeling, and willing. And each one of those three capacities can turn into a spiritual aspect of yourself when it is no longer bound by the material world, by sense perception, and by the logic that we use on the earth, which is an extraordinarily limited logic. As a matter of fact, I should probably say this from the beginning. Using math to try to understand the universe outside of the exosphere is a complete waste of time. It will not work. It never has worked. All calculations that you're ever given about cosmic events, cosmic placements, the movement of the planets around the sun, those are all completely silly theories, which are changed all the time. For instance, we used to believe that the sun rotated around the earth. Then it became the theory that the earth rotates around the sun. Now we know by using computer simulations of all the data that we are able to gather from every type of telescope, every type of thing that is used in astrophysics, it is not that way. We follow behind the sun exactly as Rudolf Steiner predicted, and soon we'll have, well, we already do have out a book called The Celestial Cosmos, Ethers and Plasma. And in that book, we show Steiner's theories, which were so in advance of his time that what he has said is still being revealed in this day. And he is by far the most accurate and has the largest amount of predictions about what will be found when science discovers it of any person in science or in astrophysics or in spiritual science. And so we work from that. And that is the basis upon which we give these talks. It's the basis upon which we start our research. And we begin with spiritual science, and we go out and find science that then corroborates what it is that Rudolf Steiner had pointed out, because he told us that's what we're supposed to do. So he gave out many secrets. And that is the reason we can tell you literally what scientism cannot tell you. What is life? For instance, if you ask science, what is warmth? They can't tell you. They'll give you all kinds of statistics and lovely math and this and that and theory after theory after theory, but those theories change all the time. What if we ask a scientist, what is light? Well, they'll tell you that it moves, at a certain speed, 186,000, blah, blah, blah. No, complete nonsense. We've now seen that scientism inside of a laser can accelerate light to be 100 times the speed of what we assumed the speed of light was prior. And again, if you were to sit with a very high-paid astrophysicist and sit down with them and start talking to them about the atom, they're going to tell you about CERN and the Large Hadron Collider and the way that they take particles and smash them against each other and explode them and find new particles, neutrons and antineutrons and protons and antiprotons and boson particles and all these imaginary particles. None of those are real. As a matter of fact, the only thing that you can actually say that comes from atomic science or the theory of atoms is that it seems to be true that in cosmic space, we have what is called proto-matter, which tends to be described as neutral protons and electrons that have yet to be joined together into matter. So when we look out into space and we see plasma, you're not seeing matter. You're seeing proto-matter. It is not matter at all. And this is the silliness of science. So when we talk about what we call chemical ether in spiritual science, we could call that what creates the valence, the factors of interaction between supposed atomic particles and molecules that exchange electrons and protons and build things by the gift of carbon giving itself up as always an agent of combining. So what is called chemical ether is really the resonant harmonic vibrations or morphic vibrations that come from the movement of the planets. And the planets are following behind the sun, and the sun is moving towards, some will say, the constellation Lyra to the fixed star Vega. But the reality is that it's not quite that. All of their calculations are wrong. That's the reason every time we send anything out into space, it never gets to where we say it's going to get to. It's just a rough calculation. As a matter of fact, when Tesla sent his Roadster off to go to Mars, the predictions are now in about 125 years, it will reach the opposite end of the asteroid belt of Mars. It won't get anywhere near Mars. Why? Because the calculations are incorrect. The sun and the motion of the sun and the planets is not as seen. If you see the new simulations, it will show you, and scientists will get very upset with you and tell you this is all nonsense, but it's not. It's taken from their own machines. And remember, they make machines so that they can find what it is that they theorize is there. They don't make machines just to test things to find out what is there and see if they can put it into a cohesive whole, cosmology. Science at this point does not have a cosmology of life. So when it comes to the chemical ether, that's where they go so astray, it is almost impossible to bring them back into reality, because matter is a condensation of what you'd call energy or force that is not matter to begin with. Matter is created out of energy and force and beings. Now, when you talk about beings, then the scientists go out of their mind. But I've not met an astrophysicist that wasn't one of two things: either a diehard belief in scientism, I mean a religious belief in scientism, a belief in the Big Bang, which has been proven literally in a couple of these books. We have literally 50 points of why the Big Bang is complete nonsense, stated by scientists. The leading scientists don't believe for 1 second the Big Bang exists. That's the reason they've had to add 4 new layers to the Big Bang, because they find that their theory cannot explain life or the creation of water and oxygen that got on Earth. They can't explain that. Their theories prior to that, a fifth grader could basically laugh at them and say that that's the silliest nonsense you've ever heard. And the greatest nonsense I've ever heard is the Big Bang Theory, that a ball of matter so small it can fit in the palm of your hand exploded into our entire universe. Complete nonsense. But of course, they've added what they call inflation, because they noticed that it couldn't have been that way, the way that they describe it, because there are galaxies that are not the proper age as they look towards where they believe this big ball, this Big Bang happened. And they find out that some of the things closest to the Big Bang are not the oldest, that some of the oldest galaxies are far, far away from the Big Bang. And so the concept of atomism only applies on the Earth. The concepts of mathematics that we use, the types of mathematical constructs that we have, only apply on the Earth. And so when you try to go out into space, scientists become very, very upset, because they'll tell you that there's settled science on all these things. But let's remember, settled science has settled their science on the concept that there is no God, because they went out into the universe and they look with their telescopes and their spectrographer, just looking at everything. And what do they say? There's no God. We don't see God. Well, recently, let me first say that the fourth ether we'll talk about is called life ether. And I suggest to you that science knows little, very little, about the sources of life. You go back in history and you'll find that it changes all the time. And you can literally probably find more truth in the Frankenstein story, where you take lightning and lightning strikes inorganic matter and turns it into organic matter. That's truer than the nonsense they tell us about life from science. As a matter of fact, science ignores everything that doesn't fit their theory until a new theory comes along, and then they all say that they always knew that they always have agreed, that it's always been settled science, that life comes from DNA. Well, DNA is plasma. DNA forms just like plasma forms in space. Movement, or the union of electrons and protons, or what you could call male electron, negative, and female, positive, when they get together, a magnetic field is created when they start to move in one direction. And when they move in one direction, they start to spiral until they become helical, until they literally mimic DNA. And when this spiral happens, it's called a filament, a plasma filament. When it happens, it starts to build a layer around it to protect it and insulate it with the magnetic field. So anytime there's a flow of cosmic electricity, there has to be a magnetic field. No gravity. There's no such thing as gravity. Gravity is life ether. Gravity is condensation. It's what they would call accretion. It's the crystallization of spiritual life, energy, force, and beings coming into this realm. That is what life is. But science has no clue what life is, because in the science laboratory, scientism kills what they study. This is true in every case that I know of. They must kill it first. For instance, with the human body, let's go back a bit. With the human body, we have a physical, etheric, astral, and ego, or I am, your personality. The physical body, what does science know about the physical body? Every day, they learn more about the physical body than they ever knew collectively in all of history. There are 10,000 neurotransmitters that are found every year. There's enzymes that are found that can heal us of every illness that there is. When you hear of the new things that they find, if it isn't a mechanical device, it's probably an amino acid or it's an enzyme. Well, an enzyme You want to talk about life? As long as enzyme is in a biological condition, it has immortality. Not only that, it can stimulate as a catalyst 1 trillion reactions per second in the human body, even though that enzyme might not even be near what it is that it's catalyzing. And yet science will tell you that it's a lock and key system, and that the curled up, it looks a lot like DNA. DNA not only spirals in the helix, but then it starts to fold and it starts to make these very complicated forms, right? Which in the science labs now, they can create that. It's called a spheromax. But what they're looking at really are these forces that are coming into the physical world that they can't explain. They're coming from what you would call the unmanifest, the invisible. And so the second that you go to considering plasma, this is what you have to consider. Plasma defies all standard laws of physics, including gravity, the weak and strong nuclear force, electricity, and any other standard scientific approach to plasma as an atomic substance. Plasma passes through metal without disturbing its shape or nature. We're going to be talking a lot when we get to the secrets of plasma about UFOs and the confusion between UFOs and plasma. Certainly, the majority of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, or what do they call them? Unidentified aerial phenomena now. Since we've been able to fly through the sky, we've seen plasma balls. And we've chased them with our fastest jets. Hypersonic jets can't catch them. They can go infinite speeds, plasma balls. They can turn at right angles. They can pass through substance. Plasma balls have passed right through the International Space Station so many times that they had to make it a top secret, and you had to swear that you'd never speak of this. Pilots have had plasma balls coming directly at them in an airplane, and it passed right into the fuselage, right through, and the people in the plane all saw it, and goes out the end, and it doesn't disturb anything. So plasma is not physical. And this is where science always falls. Science always falls back to matter. So when they talk about plasma, they will tell you the biggest lie of all. In every one of the books I've studied, and I've studied so many of them, most of them are just math, dealing with the attempt to create a plasma-contained fusion on the Earth. In other words, a sun on the Earth. Oh, that's a great idea. Seeing that a fusion bomb could blow up the Earth, seeing that they think that the sun is actually an exploding ball of gas, plasma gas, which it is not. It's partially that. So when you get to science, you're going to get the most pathetic devolving into matter and into submatter, into nanoparticles, into a type of electricity. Man-made electromagnetism is not the electricity that we find in space at all. It's practically the opposite. But science, even the man who basically came up with the idea of plasma, Sir William Crookes, in 1879, which strangely enough was the year that the Archangel Michael rose up to become an archangel, an archive from an archangel, and became the time spirit. So at the very moment that the sun archangel, the Archangel Michael, came to rule, have his regency for 360 years or so, plasma was discovered. Now we're going to go back to the original discovery of plasma and some of the problems that arise there. But essentially, what did they call it? Radiant matter. Plasma is not matter. Now, I'm going to ask you to go to places that the human brain technically can't go, as long as you're a materialist or you're using earthbound thinking. Plasma is not matter. But in all the books, every book, they'll tell you plasma is the fourth state of matter. No, it's not. It's the proto-state of matter. It's the original state of pre-matter. It's the incubator of matter. It is not matter. But scientists can't handle anything that isn't matter, because if they can't hold it in their hand and just chop it up and burn it up and then analyze the ashes, that's what most science is, they don't have anything to do with it. They'll simply ignore it, or they will say that the plasma cosmology is nonsense, which it was considered to be so when two people, Alvin and Klein, came up with the plasma cosmology, and they came up with all kinds of crazy aspects to it that caused it to be completely discarded. But ever since 1879, scientists, just like with electricity, have been experimenting with plasma as an energy and as a force, trying to replicate it as they imagine that it is in our atmosphere and in the cosmic atmosphere and on the sun and in stars. Plasma appears in the aurora borealis. It appears in the electrojet, in the plasma spheres around the Earth. There were two, now there's three. One is made of protons, the others are generally electrons. So they have certain things that they have flown satellites through and tried to test things, and they tried to make theories, but their theories are 100% inaccurate. But what is true is that more money is spent on trying to understand God in matter. Well, God is not in matter. That's the last stage. That's like studying the shadow of a person, thinking that you're understanding the person. So, God is unmanifest, but the universe is manifest. And some would say that that's the being of wisdom, and the other beings of the hierarchy, angels, archangels, archai, the beings of form, the beings of movement, of wisdom, the beings of willpower, the beings of harmony, of love, and then above that, this threefold nature. Now, you can call it male, female, you can call it whatever you want, but it seems as if the human physical soul and spirit is replicating what we call intelligent design. So when I've sat down with top astronomers and astrophysicists, usually one of two things happen. Either they get so mad they literally want to kill me, or they quietly look around and then admit, I believe in intelligent design. Because anyone looking at the cosmos or the Earth, now the Earth is more confusing, but when you're looking at the cosmos, if you don't see an intelligent design there, then you're just not looking very closely. So I would say at least half of the people who teach the opposite in astrophysics and in astronomy believe that there is an intelligent being behind matter. That's moving in the right direction. But the tendency is the following, and this is what's really scary. They want to ascribe to anything that they supposedly discover the idea that that's God. For instance, at CERN, the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, which, by the way, is not there. There are two other colliders there. And by the way, they've never discovered anything. Those are all theories. It's kind of like if you believe in quantum computers, then you haven't done your homework. There's no such thing, never will be. If you believe in a super AI that has intelligence that is beyond human intelligence, then you're extraordinarily naive and you haven't done your homework, because that isn't true. Those things are lies. Or if you believe that scientists have created sustained fusion reaction on the Earth with plasma containment, which is called magnetohydrodynamic generators, and generally in tokamaks, they call them, then in fact, they are completely missing the mark. A 12-year-old boy and a 14-year-old boy have already, years ago, in their garage, independent of each other, ordered things from a hardware store or off of Amazon, and they built fusion containment through what's called pinched filament plasma and using double layer containment so that they could, in their house, and of course, the FBI showed up when they found out this in both cases, and they were there when the boys turned the machine on for the first time, and they got to see that not only did they create a true plasma reaction, which went up to 1 million degrees in a containment tube, that, of course, the metal that tube was made of, it wasn't even touching the metal. They created, through plasma, double layers. These double layers in a plasma, whether it be in space, in a plasma sphere, or whether it be in the laboratory, called a Spheromax. Either way, inside of this ball, it's like a cell, there are areas that separate out that have double layer walls between them. And in one layer, it can be 1,000,000 degrees. And in the next layer, it could be unbelievably cold as the atmosphere is, 250 degrees below zero, so on and so forth. Super cold, super hot. Okay? So essentially, when they are trying to blow up particles to find the God particle, of course, they thought the boson was it. They thought this was it, that was it. They believe that there's a particle inside of every atom that is unmanifest. And if they can blow up that atom, they can get to see it. No, all of that is complete nonsense. There's no such thing. The other day, when they thought through CERN does have 4 pits. And in those pits, they do neutrino collection and other crazy things, gamma ray collection, which is incredibly dangerous. And I'll demonstrate how this is the truth in my next statement. So they said, well, we can't do this because the people in France and Switzerland, they don't want us doing this because they're afraid it's going to blow up. Every time they do a CERN experiment, what do they say? They are going to open dimensions. And literally the last one they did just a few weeks ago, they said demons came in and many of the scientists witnessed demons. Well, they're working with demons. They're not looking for God. They're looking to be God. They're looking to discredit God. They're looking to say, aha, this is the moment of creation and we can control it. But of course, their theory says the Big Bang, then inflation, then stars 3 created water, then stars 2 created oxygen, and then stars 1 created what we have now. In other words, their theory was so inadequate to demonstrate my point. They don't have a clue where life comes from. And that's the reason we named the book The Mystery of Life Found in Plasma. Because plasma, and Rudolf Steiner's ideas given out in about 1920, he gave it to his top student and secretary, Gunther Wachsmuth, who put it in a book called Etheric Formative Forces, which in fact, anyone that has ever had a good conversation with me about these topics had thoroughly studied etheric formative forces. I have read it so many times I can't believe it, but recently I have been allowed to come out and to try to instruct and teach people on these things so that we could call a moratorium on plasma experimentation. Because if the plasma tokamaks explode, you have a hydrogen bomb. And yet, who approved this? And why did anybody agree to spend the greatest amount of money on any science machine ever created? That was the Large Hadron Collider in CERN. And now if you take, there's like dozens and dozens of tokamaks and fusion reactors all over the world, and they're all experimenting with them, and none of them are effective. The Chinese will lie and say they had 1,600 seconds of sustained fusion reaction. That's a lie. Or you have the one here in America that says they've had 10 seconds of sustained. No, that's a lie. It's just like when they say a quantum computer has demonstrated quantum entanglement. That's a lie. There's no such thing as quantum anything. That's just a theory. And so when you hear this stuff, folks, this is what we call technological fantasy utopias, where we have been told, of course, that as soon as the atom was split and we could explode it, we could create infinite energy for free for everyone. How'd that work out? It's the exact opposite. And what we're being told about nuclear reactors is not the truth. All nuclear reactors have an MHD that starts it. A nuclear reactor can't come online until it has 20% efficiency. A nuclear reactor can't do that. None of them can do that. None of the salt reactors, thorium can do it, but they don't like to use too much thorium. But thorium could replace all nuclear reactors. They could retrofit them, and there'd be no radioactive material. There'd be no waste, and you'd have infinite energy because basically thorium is one of the most available substances on the surface of the Earth. We don't have to compound uranium into basically fissile material that can explode so we can have a contained explosion. You see, this is that death cult of scientism. They want to kill. So when they first started seeing UFOs, they tried to chase them down to grab one. Well, they've never grabbed one, have they? But they are able to make it in a lab something similar. Same thing with electromagnetism. Science doesn't know what electromagnetism is. Matter of fact, I don't talk to too many people, especially people who are into the religion of scientism, because they get extraordinarily angry when you ask them simple questions that they can't answer. And basically, they can't answer any question thoroughly. There is no thorough cosmology. And Rudolf Steiner said that this mechanical occultism that would really come to the fore in America can only be antidoted by a true spiritual cosmology. And that's what we're doing here. So when you look at our book, the Eternal Ethers, A Theory of Everything, or you look at the human heart, supersensible organ of perception, or you look at the book, The Mysteries of Life Found in Plasma, or the new book, Celestial Cosmos, Ethers and Plasma, in there, as well as the second volume of the Gospel of Sophia, you find it completely explained. Now, how did we do this? How did we come up with this? We took Steiner's indications, which are extraordinarily complicated, and we started to map onto them the discoveries of science now and the information. There's nothing wrong with some of the information science comes up with. It's the theories that are completely ridiculous that make us believe that we are absolutely insignificant grains of sand on a beach in a cosmos that doesn't care about us. Well, this is a complete lie. We are the exact copy of the universe. The magnetohydrodynamic generator in your heart is the same thing that drives plasma in the cosmos. Same exact thing. Except that they didn't understand that you can have cold plasma, warm plasma, high density plasma. And so there's a list of the different plasmas they use to create new medicines and weapons. And since 1954, we've been able to shoot lightning bolts, plasma filaments, they're called. We could even program them, template them with pulsed high energy lasers and shoot them out miles and miles and miles. And then the template can create, and this is on all the new fighter jets. They're called decoys. So it shoots out a plasma filament. And at the end, when they say, I want it to go out this far, and then I want it to appear as the very jet that I'm flying. And so a jet can not only send out these magnesium bursts that become very hot that attract heat-seeking missiles, they can send out images that are hot, that are exact copies of the plane that the pilot is driving. And they can send out 20, 30, 40 of these at once. This is now known because look at China's amazing, they call them drones in some cases, but they're not drones. They're plasma filaments that basically burn up the ions in the atmosphere in certain forms so that there are created images, even with specific colors. You can see the Chinese do this, and they have gigantic dragons, and then a mothership will come, a gigantic UFO will come, and it will beam down stuff, and everybody underneath it freaks out. They think they're being taken up by a UFO. That is plasma. Okay? So they have the capacity now to project this. They can project it as a lightning bolt that is so powerful that you can't even imagine it if I described it to you in electrical terms. They can create toroids, a donut shape. They can create balls. They can create whatever image they want, project it anywhere they want. This is all done without understanding what plasma is at all. They still have no clue what plasma is. They're still experimenting. And these experiments, which we'll go to when we talk about the secrets of plasma, in the modern age, it's just like electricity. We know the effects of electricity. Do we know what electricity is? I love it when I get an electrician or someone who's really highly developed in atomic science, and I start asking them simple questions like, what is electricity running through the copper wire? They'll say, oh, those are electrons. Well, how do they get there? Well, we pull them in because of magnetic field. And as soon as the electrons move, another magnetic field is created around the wire, blah, 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 blah. So I asked them, where do those electrons come from? What exploded those atoms that created free electrons everywhere? Why are there free electrons everywhere? And they'll just look at me like, how dare you ask that question? And then I'll go ahead and hammer them with the next question. Why don't you ever talk about the protons that are in electricity? that drives them insane. because they don't even have a theory that a fifth grader could believe. And yet in all the books, it'll tell you plasma is the fourth state of matter. Plasma is radiant matter. Matter. It's refined matter. It's very etherealized matter. It's this, it's that. No, it isn't any of that. It is a proto-substance that works with the ethers. Now, there are technically 5 ethers on the earth. None of them can you see. You can't see warmth. You can see the effects of warmth. You can't see light. You see what light illuminates. You can't see atoms and chemical reactions. You can see the effect of them. And you can't see life, even though any human being has a sense in them that they can walk up to somebody and tell you how much life is in them, whether they're lively, whether they have what we consider to be the flowing energy of life that gives their ability to have a individualized personality that is even removed from the physical body, the etheric body, which is invisible, the astral body. It's invisible, but it has physical effects. Let me put it that way. And so your life body, the etheric body, is called the life body. Do you understand your life body? If you do, you're silly. If you think you do, you're silly, because we have an autonomic nervous system and a sympathetic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system and the autonomic metabolic systems of your body give you life, and you don't know how any of it happens. You breathe in, you breathe out. Well, they tell you that this is that, this is that. No, they still don't understand that process of hemoglobin and how oxygen. Well, then what happens to the nitrogen in the air? Where does it go? Well, that's your astral body. So the astral body is the body of desire. Can you see someone's desire? I was born a clairvoyant. I could always see people's desire. I didn't want to, so I had to learn not to see it. And then eventually I lost a lot of those capacities due to illness. But the point is that a psychic can look at somebody and tell you what they have as their emotional condition and what they're even thinking at that point. That's the astral body. The astral body is invisible. It's not in the material plane. It's not substance. It's not matter. So you yourself are a miracle of invisible forces, energies, and beings, what we call consciousness, life, and form. Consciousness, it gets complicated, but let's just say consciousness, you could say, is like thinking. Life is like feeling. And form is like the word or life. And so when you talk about gravity, you're not talking about gravity as Einstein. Those mathematical equations, those were thought problems, okay? They have nothing to do with reality, and the math has never proven any of that. As a matter of fact, Stephen Hawking, in all of his books, said a bunch of nonsense, and before he died, he wrote a book that said everything I've said is sheer speculation, it's nonsense, and it isn't true. And now they know it is completely false. Black holes, supermassive black holes in the center of a galaxy, do not do what Stephen Hawking said or what scientists say. They now find that it does the opposite of that, and it shoots out what's called an ion jet. That's a plasma jet, a plasma filament. It can go out 100 million light years until it connects to another galaxy, just like the nerve endings in the brain from neurons go through axons to another neuron, and those connections are what actually cause the current of the star being fed by the current of other stars. But it's invisible. Plasma has a glow state and a non-glow state. So when we're talking about these things, we're talking about the fact that people are being misled by Robert Temple and Joseph Farrell and all these other people who write about this, saying that the Kordylewski clouds, these plasma dust clouds that are together, the two clouds are 9 times bigger than the Earth. There's probably 4 of them, by the way, which they haven't noticed. But scientists said they never existed because they couldn't see them. But now they've flown satellites into them, and they find out that there are plasma cells that are 8 miles long. And inside of them are crystalline structures that look as if they have their own type of electromagnetic DNA, spiraling, helical, electromagnetic forces that bend back upon themselves and then start to whirl and swirl, and they then absorb when they come into our atmosphere through the auroral electrojet. They come into our atmosphere, they create what are called dusty plasmoids. And inside of those, they look just like the spheromax that they can make in a laboratory. They start to twist and turn. They start to separate into organs inside. They pull things out of the dust in the atmosphere and change helium and hydrogen into water and oxygen. So literally plasmoids are not alive. They are not, they act as if they're alive. They can self-construct. They move. They have almost all the characteristics of life except for consciousness where we can communicate with them. And even that, some scientists, this isn't just the spiritual scientists, modern scientists, and it's in the book, you can see that they say that these plasmoids seem as if they are alive. And that's the reason naive minds, when they come to this, want to do what scientists always say. I discovered it, and I'm going to name it something, and it's God, and I found God. And that's what some of these far left-wing thinkers think. And then the right-wing thinkers are the exact opposite. They only acknowledge that plasma is some type of matter that they wish to control so that they can use it for weapons, for untested medical procedures, and to never really fit into their cosmology. Plasma does not fit into any of their cosmologies, because plasma, when they start talking about plasma as as matter, whether radiant matter or whatever type of matter they want to say, ethereal matter, that's complete and absolute nonsense. So what we need now is the reverence to approach this mystery of plasma, knowing that it holds the secrets of life, but it also holds the secrets of proto-life, how life has descended down to the earth. We came, the descriptions of us coming from heaven, Rudolf Steiner says it is exactly that way. We come from what he calls cosmic weather, and this cosmic weather descends through the atmospheres, including the ionosphere and the ozone layers. So there's 7 of them. Well, what do almost all traditions say? There's 7 layers of heaven. You must ascend to go to them. And when you get to the top, you will reach the tree of life. And this tree of life is what we're trying to describe to you in these books. And once you read this, it will do the following. Once you understand plasma, it destroys scientism. There can be no scientism once you understand plasma.